The allegations. The allegations that they've been accused of are some of the worst allegations in the world. Put a target on their back for them to get stabbed, jumped, murdered, whatever it is, and get stabbed or beaten half to death tomorrow. It will be because this is the way it went down. And it's
5 feet by 12 feet. That's reportedly the size of the room Andrew Tate is living in right now, according to the attorney he's paying to fight for his release.
Particular, those types of allegations, SA allegations, sexual assault, and anytime you involve a child, let me tell you right now, that doesn't play well for anyone politically in jail. So it's got nothing to do with their ability to defend themselves or this or that. It's got to do with the fact that they put a target on their back for them to get stabbed, jumped, murdered, whatever it is in jail, because that is how jail politics and that is how jail gangs and how the jail economy works. There's a pecking order in jail. It's very real. And when you come in with those allegations, there's no excuses. It's your paperwork says this, therefore you're up for murder. You're fair game. You're fair game. And every time the public says Andrew and Tristan are just like Epstein, well, guess what? The public is greenlighting for them to get murdered in jail. These allegations against them are the worst for a multitude of reasons. And it's one of the reasons why they're in solitary. We hope to get them out. Look, the people over here in the system, the guards at the jail, they've been great. They've been fair to us. I've been in jails and places all around the world, and we've been treated honorably here. They have to carry out their...
His legal team says he's being held in the highest security unit in the building and has been there since the day the marshals took him into custody. They also claim the person housed on the other side of his wall spends nights screaming, making an already tense setup sound even rougher. But here's where the situation takes a wild turn. His defense isn't simply arguing that Tate is being kept too isolated. They're making the case that even inside that locked-down box, separated from the general population, his safety could still be at risk. Their position is that other inmates know what he has been accused of, and they claim that creates a real, practical security problem for him inside the facility right now. That argument went public, and within hours, people on both sides were tearing it apart, and they couldn't agree on much of anything.
To carry out their instructions, their orders, their duty. But that doesn't take away from the fact that every time somebody walks by their cell, they get called something, a word that starts with a P that's more appropriate to Epstein and not appropriate to them. And because of that, they have a target on their back that's very, very real. People could say, I'm up here and I am pontificating about what ifs and maybes, or I'm exaggerating, or I'm being hyperbolic. I am not. If one of them gets stabbed or beaten half to death tomorrow, it will be because this is the way it went down. And
critics came back with a hard counter. Given the allegations listed in the charging documents, they argue that the high security unit isn't necessarily the punishment his lawyers make it out to be. From their point of view, that separation could actually be one of the main things keeping him away from potential trouble in a general population wing. And now the clock is ticking. Both brothers are set to remain where they are for at least 2 more weeks. Their legal team has to file the motion seeking release by August 5th, while a federal magistrate in Miami has reportedly set August 13th for the bail decision. That hearing could determine whether they walk out while the case moves forward or stay locked up as the extradition process keeps rolling. That argument went public, and within hours, both sides were ripping into it, and they could barely agree on a single detail. A lot of critics came back with the same counter. Considering what the charging documents allege, they argue that the high security unit isn't necessarily the punishment his lawyers describe. In their view, that separation may actually be what keeps him away from potential trouble inside a general population wing. Now look at the clock, because the next few dates matter.
Situation is getting more interesting. I just got out of a court hearing, and they are still in detention right here. There is a press conference going on, and here is the latest. The latest is that the prosecution is arguing that they should be detained, and that it actually should continue the way it is, and they should be in, solitary confinement unit, and 23 hours a day with criminals, murderers, and people, of course, supposedly danger to the public. However, when the defense, and there are lawyers right here, when they were saying, could you please provide us with any proof, anything that the UK has provided, the defense is like, oh, we don't know, we don't have a full package, it might take 60 days for us to receive any kind of information and full package, and then the defense is going to receive it. So how they're even supposed to argue against their solitary confinement and detention, how they can go into a detention hearing, which is now scheduled for the 13th of August, without even the ability to see who's the accuser, what is the fucking proof, none of it. Today, they're like, oh, I don't know, I witnessed it with my own eyes. They said, oh, we don't, maybe within 60 days. That's it. This is all you need to know. directly from...
Both brothers are set to remain where they are for at least another 2 weeks. Their team has to file the motion-seeking release by August 5th, and a federal magistrate in Miami has reportedly set August 13th for the court to decide whether they get bail or remain detained while the extradition process keeps moving. Their lawyer's safety argument gets even more intense from there. He says officials still have to carry out their instructions, their orders, their duty. But he claims that doesn't change what allegedly happens whenever somebody passes their cell. According to him, they get called something, a word that starts with a P that's more appropriate to Epstein and not appropriate to them. His point is that this treatment has allegedly put a target on their back that's very, very real.
Said that the process is the punishment. American citizens, in order for your freedom to be deprived, you have to be convicted in a court of law. There are certain exceptions. The extradition proceedings is one of them. So the enemies of Andrew and Tristan Tate know this, and they are doing what they have always done, and they are weaponizing the court process and weaponizing detention against them in order to get them to break. Because when you put innocent men or any man in solitary confinement, at a certain period of time, they begin to deteriorate, they begin to decompensate, they begin to break down, and it's never, ever good. The process is the punishment. But we're going to do our best to get them out of solitary confinement. We're going to do our best to get them in front of the judge and make sure we have no doubts that this case will be handled here the right way. The other thing I'll say is the process is the punishment has always been one of our mottos. The other motto is less is more sometimes in life. And right now, it's less. They got a whole lot of nothing, and that means so much more for us. So we feel good about where we're at, and unless they can provide corroboration with all these allegations that they've accused Andrew and Tristan of, then what they really have at the end of the day is a big bag of nothing. Thank you very much.
And he didn't soften the warning. He said people could accuse him of pontificating about what ifs and maybes, exaggerating or being hyperbolic, but insisted, "I am not." He then went further, saying, if one of them gets stabbed or beaten half to death tomorrow, it will be because this is the way it went down. That is his lawyer's warning, not proof that such an attack will happen, but it shows just how heavily the defense is pushing the safety issue. Judging by the online reaction, that August date could carry serious weight, especially because of the sheer scale of the allegations on the paperwork.
How deep the brainwashing goes, there's more people happy about Andrew Tate being arrested than not a single person on the Epstein files being arrested. Look how hard they're going after this guy, and they're not putting even an ounce of energy to anyone on the Epstein files. Do you not see how fucked up that is, bro? When there's physical proof of them being pedophiles, sacrificing babies, and eating baby organs. And the other side is all accusations. No matter what you believe about the guy, this is fucked.
Between the two brothers, the reported total stands at 59 separate charges. Of those, 38 were announced by British prosecutors in one batch, on top of 21 already reported, involving 4 complainants and allegations spanning roughly 7 years. The allegations remain allegations unless proven in court, but some commentators argue that a case this big could make the process slower, not faster. So when the court takes another look, if bail is denied, the brothers stay put while attention shifts back toward extradition. And that process has another major deadline. Britain has reportedly been given until September 16th to submit its full extradition request to the State Department. That's still the paperwork stage, meaning the fight over the underlying merits of extradition has more ground to cover, and that's why people following this case aren't looking away. Once a legal battle gets mixed with this much online noise, even basic procedural moves can turn into headline material. Supporters quickly grabbed onto the defense team's safety claims, while critics are pushing the opposite message. Let the legal process move at its own pace instead of letting internet pressure call the shots. Underneath all that noise are extremely serious allegations, and with bail, detention, and extradition all moving on separate tracks, every new court date is getting watched like a major event. Right now, the court calendar is saying more than almost anybody involved, and every quiet stretch between hearings is only making the speculation louder.
You've made it very clear this is personal for you. Tell me why.
Well, it is personal.
How does £20 million spread across schools across the country counteract someone like Andrew Tate? He has 11 million followers on X.
people like Andrew Tate are a real difficulty, and for teenage boys, they need to talk about that because it's very difficult for them to navigate their way.
Countering the damage he causes, is £20 million up to that challenge. He's on the same platform as your government pushes out communications. Yet what can you do about it?
Well, we can push out communications.
And they're spending billions trying to deprogram men from my programming of go to the gym. Scary. While they let grooming gangs, while they let criminals steal, while they let murderers, while they let immigrants arrive, all the problems of that country, everyone's talking about me. What is my chance of a fair trial in the UK when the Prime Minister is saying I'm the biggest problem for the country? 0. That's why they tried to extradite.
The longer this stays unresolved, the more every single date gets hyped like it could be the turning point. Even before a judge reads one word of the next ruling, and there's another layer hanging over that next courtroom appearance. If the two brothers walk back in and are told they're staying behind bars while the extradition process keeps crawling forward, and few expect that process to move overnight, some people watching believe the psychological pressure could become even heavier. That concern isn't coming only from random posts online either. Their own lawyer has publicly raised it, arguing that keeping someone isolated for an extended period can cause them to deteriorate and break down, and warning that prolonged isolation never ends well.
Darmer, I heard you're in a little bit of trouble. I've got bad news for you because you're in a whole bunch more. I'm here in America and I've just been handed a document which proves that Morgan McSweeney, who was your chief of staff under the Labour government, was behind the entire attack that happened against me. It breaks international law. It completely breaks the presumption of innocence. It shows the corruption of the British state. It shows that you were afraid that I was inspiring bravery in young men, and when young men are brave, they will prevent the Labour government from enslaving the entire UK population. That is why you have insulted me every single day in the mainstream news. That is why you told the Romanians to lock me up, even though I never did anything wrong. That is why members of parliament to this day slander me every single day, because the primary objective is to attach heinous allegations to my name to the point where people are afraid to use my influence. They know I'm influential. I'm the most influential. So they want everybody afraid to associate with me because of the heinous allegations attached to my...
That's the defense team's position, but it shows exactly how high they're trying to raise the stakes around what happens next. Now factor in who these two men are. Their whole public image was built around freedom, money, flashy living, and acting like nobody could tell them what to do. Andrew has been giving his own version of what that lifestyle swap looks like behind bars. And according to him, during one full week inside, he was allowed his hour of exercise only twice. He claims that on the other 5 days, he stayed inside his cell for 24 hours straight without even seeing a guard pass by. And his claims don't stop there. Tate says he had no commissary access, no phone calls, and no visits. He has also claimed that a broken faucet left him drinking water he described as brown and filthy, which he says contributed to ongoing stomach problems.
When things go wrong. I love when Bitcoin crashes. I love when I lose my money. I love getting arrested. I love going to jail. I love it. You're like, I want to go back. That's the true heartbreaking thing. I don't want to be on a private jet to Hong Kong. I want to go to jail. I want to go back to the jail cell with the cockroaches. And I want to sit there by myself, meditating. While the whole world lies about me, I want to sit there like this. I want to sit there for years. That's what I want to do. But unfortunately, I made so much fucking money, and I'm so fucking famous and so fucking smart and so many powerful friends. And now I'm floating on the surface and I miss my old life. I miss the suffering. I miss the pain. And you're fucking emailing me complaining about having exactly what I fucking want.
Those are his allegations about the conditions, but the contrast is still striking. This is a man who publicly flexed a collection of 33 supercars, now describing life inside a tiny cell with almost none of the freedom his brand was built around. That whiplash is exactly why the internet is going crazy over every update. Whether you believe Andrew Tate should remain behind bars if the courts ultimately find grounds for it, or you believe he's being unfairly targeted and question the UK government's role in the case, the gap between the life he sold online and the one he now describes from detention could hardly be more extreme. Most people eventually land on the same uncomfortable point. Nobody wants to see another high-profile case where a defendant remains locked up indefinitely while the actual trial keeps getting pushed further into the distance. And that comparison didn't simply appear online because somebody wanted clicks. His own attorney brought up the comparison publicly, arguing that other inmates could associate his clients with another infamous high-profile defendant. But here's the bigger question underneath this entire mess. Could Andrew Tate have done something serious enough to justify keeping him detained while the legal process plays out? Plenty of people would say yes without thinking twice, especially given the seriousness of the allegations surrounding the case. There's no shortage of material online being used to support that argument, and I've covered plenty of that material myself. At the same time, another argument keeps getting louder. Is there also a political dimension running alongside the criminal case? A lot of Tate's supporters believe there is. They argue that certain institutions and parts of the wider political conversation have reasons to want his influence reduced. Critics push back hard on that idea, saying serious criminal allegations don't become political persecution simply because the defendant is famous, controversial, or has powerful enemies. And that's where this gets messy.
Person and deserves jail. 1 week later, he was arrested. Was he charged with beating her up? No, that's on video. Wasn't charged with that. How did I know that was a setup? Because that video is 15 years old. Why would they hold on to a video for 15 years and never release it? No one ever saw it before. Then it pops up out of nowhere. Then he's arrested. Because if they just arrested him out of nowhere, people would be like, hey, not Diddy, I like his songs. No, they want everyone to believe you're guilty before you're even found guilty. So they had to release the video to set him up. Why
Can you explain that more? The gradual disclosure thing?
Absolutely. So the media is specific. It's almost like the media makes things come true. It doesn't report what happened and what's true. It makes things come true. So let's look at my example, for example, and I think this explains it. If I wasn't there, the video wouldn't have gone viral. Why? Because they're trying to lock me up for being a hateful person. So they have to take anything they can get and push to the public constantly and endlessly, not because I am hateful, but to convince them I'm hateful so they can lock me up for being hateful. That's what the media does. It shapes.
For many people following the story, those questions are no longer being treated as automatically mutually exclusive. They're asking whether serious allegations can deserve full investigation while political and cultural forces can also shape the wider conversation around a defendant. Tate's side is leaning heavily into that framing, and online, the battle over that narrative is becoming almost as heated as the legal case itself. The version his lawyer is pushing comes down to one very specific contrast, and as a piece of messaging, it hits hard. According to that account, just days before the arrest, the brothers were in Washington taking meetings about launching a British political party, discussing future election cycles, and sitting across from people who actually hold public office. Then, only days later, the picture completely flips. A 5x12 cell. Andrew has pushed that narrative even further himself. He has directly named a former British Prime Minister while portraying the case as political persecution and claiming that the country simply hates him.
And we feel good about the process going forward. I just want to make a brief recitation of events that has led up to where we're at today. There's a long-standing court order in effect in Romania, and that court order essentially, in purpose, stays the United Kingdom's extradition proceedings. This is how Andrew and Tate have been traveling across the world for the past several years. Every time they take a trip, every month they go back on the 21st or the 17th, whatever the Romanian court requires, and they have made their appearances. They have fulfilled the obligations at their judicial release in Romania to the letter of the law. They have never, ever missed a date. The agreement with Romania in the United Kingdom is for the United Kingdom to step back and let proceedings play out in Romania.
Whether you believe that argument or think it's a calculated defense strategy, it's easy to understand why the story spreads. It's simple, dramatic, and comes packaged with an obvious villain, something that travels through social media way faster than anybody is going to sit down and unpack a 59-count indictment. That's exactly why this conversation refuses to die down. For a huge chunk of the audience, it stopped being just another legal case a long time ago. Now it's also become a debate about what prolonged uncertainty does to a controversial public figure, especially somebody whose every post, courtroom appearance, and lawyer update gets chopped up and dissected within minutes. And that creates another problem. Almost everything reaches the public through clips, screenshots, posts, and reaction videos. In that environment, documented facts, defense claims, speculation, and straight-up internet reactions can get mashed together almost instantly. Before the actual legal paperwork has even been fully digested, millions of people may already have their own version of what happened and why. Plenty of people aren't even tracking the eventual verdict anymore. They're watching the aftershocks. One camp argues that the delay itself starts functioning like a punishment, regardless of what a judge eventually decides. The other camp looks at the massive public reaction and says that alone shows how messy and politically charged the conversation around this case has become. Either way, the attention keeps climbing, and every new development brings another wave of opinions, accusations, and unanswered questions about where this thing ultimately goes. Tate has also pushed his own argument from inside, and this is the one that caught serious traction online.
Buddy, I'm currently outside the jail where Andrew Tate is being held, and dude, I don't see anybody here, bro. There's not a single... I mean, it is raining to be fair, but bro, not a single person with a sign or a protest or anything, guys. Look at this. I'm pretty sure that right up there, it's like one of these buildings. It's pouring rain, but nobody here. What's...
In his framing, if he genuinely were the kind of offender described in the allegations, British authorities wouldn't be going to such lengths to pursue him internationally. He then pointed to a list of British establishment figures and institutions that he claims have received protection or softer treatment, arguing that the contrast somehow supports his innocence. That is Tate's argument, not proof of what actually happened. Being pursued, or allegedly treated differently from somebody else, doesn't establish guilt or innocence. But as a social media narrative, it's powerful because Tate flips the prosecution itself into part of his defense. The harder authorities come after him, the more he tells his audience that the pursuit proves there's something bigger going on. That argument landed hard with Tate's audience, but critics spotted what they saw as a major hole almost immediately. Several of the establishment figures he pointed toward have faced serious consequences of their own, including titles being removed and diplomatic roles ending amid documented controversies and associations. So the idea of one untouchable establishment protecting everybody inside it gets a lot messier once you look at what has actually happened. And even if Tate's comparison were completely fair, it still wouldn't answer the 59 charges reportedly attached to this case. Saying somebody else received different treatment doesn't establish that the allegations against you are false. Critics call that a deflection, not a defense, and both things can exist at once. Institutions can be inconsistent while a separate criminal case still has to stand or fall on its own evidence. Then there's another layer that keeps coming back. For years, the conversation around Tate has included claims that his political connections gave him influence or protection at different points, and Tate himself has publicly talked about having political contacts and receiving favors. That doesn't automatically prove he had some kind of official cover, but a lot of viewers now have a street-simple read on the situation. Whatever influence they believe he once had clearly isn't keeping him out of this legal fight now. What Tate appears to genuinely believe is that years of headlines painting him as a damaging influence on young men, and by extension, wider society, weren't simply commentary. In his framing, they were groundwork. He puts the wider culture war around masculinity into that same box, arguing that the public image of him was built long before authorities ever came through the door. So when the legal hammer finally dropped after what Tate describes as years of buildup, his argument is that millions of people had already been primed to expect the worst. In his telling, that meant even the most serious allegations listed in the case, including allegations involving complainants who were underage at the relevant time, would be easier for the public to believe because opinions about him had already hardened. That is Tate's interpretation of the media environment, not evidence that the allegations are false or that authorities coordinated the coverage, but it explains why his defense narrative reaches far beyond what happens inside the courtroom. Then there's the argument his legal team keeps hammering harder than almost anything else: flight risk. And on paper, this is one of the cleaner cards they're trying to play. The brothers traveled between multiple countries after certain movement restrictions were lifted, and their lawyers point out that when required court dates came around, they continued showing up rather than disappearing. That's the defense team's pitch in plain English. Men planning to run don't normally keep walking back into the legal process they supposedly want to escape. And that sets up the exact question Tate's lawyers want everybody asking. If they had previous opportunities to disappear and didn't take them, why would they suddenly decide to bolt now? Prosecutors in the court can obviously weigh other factors when assessing flight risk, but the brothers' attendance record is central to the defense argument. Whatever side you're on, nobody sensible wants this turning into a legal limbo where the case drags endlessly without reaching the stage where the evidence is properly tested. And for the moment, there's an uncomfortable twist. The high security setup their lawyers are criticizing may also offer more separation from other inmates. Moving them into a standard general population wing could create a completely different security calculation, and that's where the detention argument gets complicated fast. Viewers keep circling back to the seriousness of the allegations, including those involving complainants who were underage at the relevant time, and that's where the safety conversation gets real tense. The concern being raised is that another inmate looking to build a reputation could potentially do something reckless. Even with both brothers inside and potentially looking out for each other, critics of their detention conditions argue there are still plenty of people in that facility who could decide they have a reason to cause trouble. But there's another detail commenters have clocked, and it makes this arrest feel very different. The visible support around Tate appears to have thinned out dramatically compared with the previous arrest, which drew organized protests and a much louder public pushback. This time, according to posts and accounts circulating online, the scene outside was reportedly reduced to one person holding a sign. Even that image reportedly ended up attracting a community note online. And that drop-off matters. Whatever support Tate may still have across social media, the street-level response being described this time looks nowhere near as loud or organized. That contrast is why some viewers think the entire situation has shifted structurally. Same. Massive online name, but a very different show of visible support when things got serious. Some people argue that once the public noise dies down, the entire case starts getting read differently, especially when the headlines and viral clips stop hitting every few hours. Others push back on that hard, saying a quieter reaction doesn't mean the controversy disappeared or got resolved. It could simply mean the internet found something else to obsess over for the moment. But one detail cuts through almost all of those arguments. Tate is reportedly being held in one of the most restricted units in the building, with his side claiming he has had no calls and no visits. Yet his online account hasn't gone silent. Posts are still appearing, his version of events is still reaching millions, and somebody outside is clearly keeping that media operation moving. Even from a 5x12 cell, the machine is still running, and that's why every little move gets clocked so closely. The allegations remain disputed, the legal process is still unfolding, and major questions have yet to be decided in court. Meanwhile, everything happening inside and outside that facility gets clipped, posted, analyzed, and argued over almost frame by frame. Physical isolation may limit where Tate can go, but it clearly hasn't stopped the online battle over how his story gets told. Details that would normally barely get a second look suddenly start carrying way more weight than they were ever built to handle. And that's what happens when the spotlight gets this intense. A routine update becomes a major clue. A small courtroom move becomes a supposed turning point, and every silence gets filled with another theory. That's why the arguments over safety, influence, and whether massive public pressure is affecting how people read the process keep hanging over this entire story. Even people openly admitting they have no clue how the case ultimately lands are still dissecting every move, because at this point, almost nothing connected to it gets treated like a minor detail. And that's what makes this case so hard to look away from. Right now, there are serious allegations, aggressive defense arguments, competing narratives, and an internet audience trying to reach a verdict before the courts have even finished doing their job. The next hearings could change the entire direction of the story, but until then, the facts, claims, and speculation are going to keep colliding online. The real question is what happens when the legal process finally catches up with all that noise. Do the courts ultimately back the prosecution's case, or does Tate's defense manage to punch serious holes in it? And regardless of the outcome, how much damage has already been done by months of uncertainty, headlines, and non-stop public judgment? Drop your take in the comments. Do you think this is simply the justice system doing its job, or do you think there's more going on behind the scenes? Keep it respectful because the allegations remain disputed and the courts still have plenty to decide. If you enjoyed the breakdown, hit like, subscribe for the next update, share this video with someone following the story, and comment below with what you think happens next.